Greetings! In this video we will create a 2x2 diagonal brick that we'll use in several projects. Let's get started. We'll come to File, Import. We'll import our peg start, and you'll recall that in our Options dialog box on the right hand side we want to have Merge into Selected Namespace. And that way when it comes in, it just comes in with its name and not the scene file name also. We'll grab the Move tool and we'll grid snap this down into a quadrant. We'll hit the Command key to duplicate and we'll grid snap that over. Command key, grid snap it up. Command D, grid snap that over. I'm also going to hit wireframe unshaded so we can see that a little bit better. And we can hide our grid and we'll draw a bounding box and we'll hit combine. You see you still have your transforms left, so we'll come and just right off the bat delete our history. We're left with our polycylinder. If you hit the 3 key, you can see that those overlapping vertices weren't welded or merged. So we'll right click, choose vertex, draw a bounding box, and come up to Edit Mesh, Merge. And now when we hit the 3 key, we can see that those border vertices or overlapping vertices have been welded or merged together. We'll come back into the one mode, we'll double click that outer edge, and this workflow should be familiar to you by now. We'll hit extrude. The local translate Z is -4.8. With that edge selected, we can come up to Mesh Fill Hole, and then hit the Q key, always a good idea to get out of the modeling toolkit that way, and then we'll choose multi-cut. We'll click drag and click drag, enter, click drag, enter, click drag, enter, return on the Macintosh, right click, just click drag, enter, or return, click drag. And there we have the bottom complete. Hit the 4 key, just make sure that that looks good all the way around, and it does. Q key, right, we're making a selection. We'll pick that first face, shift click, shift double click, shift click, shift double click, shift click, shift double click. We've got those all the way around. We'll hit extrude. Our offset, as you'll recall, is 0.8. And then with those faces selected, we'll hit extrude one more time. And our local translate Z is -4. And there is, and we'll hit the Q key, right click to object mode. And there we have our unbeveled 2x2. If you wanted to save this out, that would be a good idea. And in fact, let's, you could export that. Before we did that, we'd want to delete the history once more, clean up the inputs, and you could export this, right? File, export, and we would just call this 2x2 unbeveled. I'm just going to duplicate it and set it aside. This is another option for you. We'll hit duplicate, and then we're just going to slide this over in the channel box, come down to layers, make a new layer, and then just hide that. We want to have a reserve to be able to get back to this point because there is potential for lots of mistakes. There are lots of forks in the road, and so we'd like to be able to come back to this general starting point, 2x2 unbeveled. Okay, let's look in the side view. I'll turn on the wireframe, and here we're into the new information, so I'll slow down a bit and explain the process. First, we want to make a 45-degree angled brick. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we have 4 square, we could just connect the two edges and we'd have a 45-degree. But we don't have anything to snap here on the brick itself. We can use our edge loop tool. Remember that the multi-cut with the control key allows us to create an edge loop, and let's just review that real quick. I grab the multi-cut, and if I hold down the control key, oops, let me make sure this is selected. Object geometry needs to be selected in object mode. We use the multi-cut, and I can hold down the control key, and you can see that that loop goes all the way around. There's a couple of reasons we wouldn't do this. We also need a loop on the inside. So rather than manually inputting two edge loops, we can use the multi-cut tool in its default on the outside. And let me just, if you haven't seen this yet, I can just click and drag, and that cut goes all the way through. you can see that it's on the interior faces and the exterior faces. I'm going to undo that. We're going to use that method, right? Let me just do that one more time. You can just cut right through a shape. I'll hit the Z key to undo. Right, we could cut straight across, but that's not straight, and it would be very difficult to draw that exactly straight, if not impossible. So we'll use the grid. We'll hold down the X key. I'm in the side view, right? We're Z forward. We're going to put our 45-degree diagonal on the front side, or the positive Z. So I'm currently in my side view. Now hold down the X key. Now the grid snapping with the multicut is a little bit different. It only appears when you get to the grid. So here I am on the grid, and I'll click, and then again holding the X key, and we'll do the same thing over here. And then we'll hit enter, and you can see that that's exactly where we wanted it, right? This leaves us 4 units by 4 units here, and it's also on the interior because we're going to have 2 diagonals, right? The interior and the exterior. I'm going to undo that and just review quickly. In order to use this multicut, we have to have the object selected in object mode. Come into the side view, multicut, hold down the X key, hold down the X key, hit return. We've got that exactly where we want it, right? We've got 4 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll be able to create that diagonal across. And because we use this method rather than the insert edge loop, we've also got that new edge on the interior. It's as if it's been sliced all the way through. All right, that would be a good place to increment and save, just to be able to get back to this position. Now we want to be able to draw this diagonal from here to here, and we want it to go through the exterior cube and the interior cube. So we want to slice again. So we'll use that same technique. We'll grab the multicut and look very closely here. We're going to grid snap here, and we're going to grid snap here. So you may need to pause that and just take a look, and you can see that this new diagonal cut right through and gave us that 45-degree angle that we're after. So look at those 2 grids, and then we'll hit return. And there we have our border, and we can delete these exterior faces. Let me do this with both the perspective view and the side view. It's better to make the selection in the side view, but it's easier for you to see what's happening. So I drew this bounding box that gave me the exterior, and I'm just going to hit delete. Now we can see that interior box. We'll draw a little bounding box, and we'll also hit delete. And we'll come into the perspective view, and so there is our diagonal. We have a few things to do before we can cover these faces. The first is that this interior, it shouldn't meet that diagonal. There should be an offset here as well. So we're going to use the multicut tool on the shape this time. We don't want to project it through because we don't want an extra diagonal here. We only want the extra diagonal on the interior. So I'm going to click drag, take a look at that edge, and we'll click drag, pull that down, and we'll hit return. Right, so we've connected this. We'll come to the other side, click drag, and then click drag, and we'll hit return. And now these this set of faces, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 faces, we're going to delete. Now you could manually select all the way around, but you should know by now we can just shift click, and that will give us all of the components in between. But if you were just selecting them, that might be easier to see, right? So let me just do it a section at a time. So we're deleting those 4, then these 2, then the front 4. And right when you're selecting face, it's always a good idea to make sure you didn't accidentally select something on the other side. And then finally these 2. And so now you can see, and especially if we come into the side view, we've got this new angle here, but it's only on the interior. So there will be a space between the interior diagonal and the exterior. Now, one thing to mention here, if I hit the 3 key, we can see that there are overlapping vertices when we use that diagonal cut, and they weren't merged. And so this is another example of when we'll just draw a big bounding box of vertices, and we'll come up to Edit Mesh Merge. Now let me do this with the smooth preview on. So this vertex here and this vertex here, this vertex and this vertex, likewise these two and these two, in the one mode they're sitting on top of each other but they're not welded. And so you can see when we go to subdivide, because they're not welded or merged, we would have an additional edge or additional face. So let's do this in the 3 mode. We'll come up to Edit Mesh Merge, and you see now that those two vertices that were overlapping have been welded together. And this is where we want to continue from, right there. Take a look. We'll come back to the 1 key and let's finish the interior face. We can just double click that edge and come up to Mesh Fill Hole. And then we'll use our multi-cut and we're just going to click drag across, click drag across, click drag across. And we are not going to connect this vertical here. We're actually going to delete that. If you take a look, right, we've got this try here, but we can just pick this edge, and I'll go ahead and select the edge on the other side. And then here is a word about deleting edges. If I just hit delete, the vertex that's there will be left behind. And then that would create a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In fact, let me just do that. I'm just going to hit delete. We don't want to use this method. Let me demonstrate why not. I'm going to hit delete. And now if we come and look, that vertex was left behind. And now if we count this face, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember that we want everything to be 4s. So I'm going to hit undo, bring that back. I have this edge selected and the same on the other side. And if we want to delete the edge and also the extra vertex, we come to Edit Mesh, Delete Edge Vertex. Edit Mesh, Delete Edge Vertex. And now if we come and right click, right, that vertex is also been deleted. So the associated vertex has been deleted. Let me just undo that again. I'll right click. We want this edge. We're not going to hit delete on the keyboard. We're going to come the long way. Delete edge, and it should say and vertex. Delete edge and vertex. And we can right click to verify that vertex is now gone. Do the same thing on the outside. We'll double click that edge if you want to see that in wireframe. And we'll come up to Mesh Fill Hole. Mesh Fill Hole. And we'll finish the face here by connecting these edges across. And same thing as that interior, we're not going to cut across here, we're just going to get rid of this edge and this edge. Once again, if we hit delete, that vertex is left behind. We don't want that vertex left behind, so we'll pick this edge, and we'll come to Edit Mesh, Delete Edge and Vertex. You can think of it that way. And although this shape is a triangle, you see that it is quad. 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are 4s. So everything is 4 all the way around. Now we've got tries up here, but once we subdivide it, those will be converted into quads. And we'll have 4 sides all the way around, including this, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Same thing on the outside. Okay, now we're ready to bevel, and this is a complex selection. So you would want to export this or save it, or if you just wanted to work in the same scene, we can duplicate it, right? We'll hit duplicate, and we'll move this one in the other direction, right? We'll move it in the negative X. We'll make a layer, and then we can hide that away. So, right, we've got our extra, oops, I moved that in the positive Z, but we've got our extra unbeveled cube on a layer, and we've got our unbeveled diagonal on a layer, just in case we make a mistake. Although you can just use undo. And let's make this selection. Making these edge selections is, again, it's not technically difficult, but getting the selection right, there's potential for misselection. So we've got that rectangle around, and let's just go down the shape. So we'll get this 2 diagonals on the front. We'll get this on the back. Now again, I don't want to double click because I don't want that edge to come up here. So I'm just going to pick that edge, and then we'll come down this edge, come around to the front, this edge. Now we also want this to be hard, so we'll shift double click, right? That came back to here, we'll shift double click, and we want that edge loop going all the way around. We'll shift double click the bottom, and let's just pause here for a moment. So this is all the exterior top and sides. We've got the rectangle on the top, we've got these diagonals, we've got the corner edges on the rear, we've got this edge loop going all the way around because we want this to be hard, this edge loop going all the way around, and now we're ready to start with the bottom and the interior. So we have our 4 diagonals. We'll shift double click this bottom square, right? And now we're going to move inside. We'll shift double click this interior edge, and that stopped there, so we'll shift double click to get it all the way around. We've got these diagonals moving up. We want this to be hard as well, so we'll click around here. I don't want to double click because it would also select this edge, which we don't want. We'll just manually click, select all the way around, and then we want these corners and these corners. So the 4 corners all the way around. It's just that they're short on the front in this instance, and that is it. Let's hit the 4 key. That's really hard to see, but I'll dolly around slow. And it's just the same idea of where do you want the shape to remain hard when we subdivide it. So that is the selection all the way around, the rectangle on the top, corners, this edge loop, which may not be intuitive, right? That edge loop, we need it to go all the way around because we want this front. We've got the square bottom interior. We've got these diagonals running up, and you can see that there. And one of those things, if you miss one or you accidentally select something you shouldn't have, you can undo, reopen, or in this case, we've got one reserved on a layer. We'll come to the modeling toolkit. We'll hit our bevel tool. The fraction is 0.2 and the segments are 2. We'll manually click on our select tool to get out of that. We'll right click to object mode, and we'll hit the 3 key just to test. Right, we can look at our shape, and there we've got a diagonal running all the way around. I'm beveled all the way around on our diagonal. So you would definitely want to save this one, right? You could export this as your 2x2 diagonal. This one is beveled, but sub D0, right? We haven't subdivided it yet. And we're doing that because these we can use in our dynamics exercises. But when we're creating a build where the visual is going to be evaluated a little bit more closely, we would subdivide this. So actually, let me just duplicate this, and I'll slide it. Let's say we'll slide it back in this case, put it on a layer, hide it away, and then with this one, we'll subdivide it. Now I see my inputs. I've got a ton of history here, so we will delete all our history. We'll come to Mesh, Smooth, and here is our shape subdivided once. We'll turn that wireframe off, and there's your diagonal. And this is used in a ton of brick builds, and this is of course a simple one. We don't have the cylinder on the bottom. We'll be creating the intermediate and advanced bricks and plates in upcoming exercises, but if you're stacking and not going to be looking at the bottom, this is the piece that you would use. So this is the most used version of this particular brick. All right, questions in the discussion forum. Have a good one.